We are tonight with Eva Illouz, professor of sociology in Paris. Her latest book is The End of Love by Editions Codice Edizioni in Italy, in which she addresses the end of love between the capitalist machine and social networks. Eva Illouz, are love affairs in social relations systems of power?
Oh, sure. Well, I would say, they're not, they are not. I mean, the emphasis is on the are. And I would say, no, they are not necessarily systems of power, but they are very much connected to systems of power. Well, for one, the obvious way in which they're connected to systems of power is, the Romeo and Juliet paradigm, where desire is tightly connected to tight control by families and communities and the clan. And in that respect, so I would say romantic and sexual desire is very much connected to an economy of prohibition and of what is forbidden. That's the obvious answer. A second, I would say also quite obvious answer is the ways in which heterosexual relations have been codified, and in particular, what we think of as being the romantic gestures of men towards women were tightly embedded in patriarchy, so that we can say that, what the French call galanterie, the kind of gentlemanly behavior that men have to women expressed a protectiveness which actually derived from men's superior, usually legal and socioeconomic status. And we may even go further with a few feminists, Shulamit Firestone and others, who view love actually as the pivot, the kind of psychological vessel or psychological motif or mechanism enabling heterosexuality to exert its power. So that's a second obvious way in which power and love are very much connected. A third way is also quite obvious for sociologists of marriage, and it is that social class plays a fairly big role in the choice of a mate. So even when communities are no longer involved, individuals actually find ways of choosing each other according to criteria of social class. So in those respects, we can say that within the dynamics of romantic feelings, we have embedded in it structures of power inscribed in those sentiments. But my own research, what I've been trying to do for the last, 20, 30 years, is show another dimension in addition to those three, and it is that capitalism, and especially consumer culture, has transformed in a significant way how we meet, how people choose each other, the very notion of choice, the kind of evaluations people run with themselves when they choose a partner, the extreme importance of sexuality. All of these are connected to economic regimes which make us into consumers and lovers at the same time. I think a great deal of my work has consisted in showing this connection between consumer capitalism, neoliberal capitalism, between the grammar of the market and the grammar of intimate personal relationships.
And this is the second question, which is so much correlated to the first. Is it possible to build up a new affectivity inside a late capitalist society?
So I don't know exactly at what level you mean the question, if you mean individually or if you mean collectively. So first of all, we can consider feminism as maybe the most significant, historically most significant attempt to build a new, what you call a new affectivity inside a capitalist society. And I would say that feminism is about basing intimacy on equality and freedom. Now, has it succeeded? I think the point of my book is to show that this attempt, this collective attempt to build a new affectivity is actually a very difficult one because it interacts with market structures and with a culture which perpetuates still very much patriarchy through, among other things, through the intense sexualization of women's bodies. So one of the paradoxes of the increased freedom and equality of women is that they've been allowed, so to speak, to intently sexualize themselves, their bodies, their interactions. And this, as I show in my last book, The End of Love, this has had as a consequence, in fact, to cast women, to devaluate, in fact, to devaluate women, to devaluate the body of a woman. So in that sense, I completely rejoin the analysis of Catherine McKinnon, for whom the domination of women goes through sexuality. Only that when you intensify this sexuality through processes of sexualization, and this is what has happened actually in the last 30 years. So you have a paradox, which is on the one hand, feminism, which has made a lot of advances, but on the other hand, in many ways, the body of women and femininity itself has lost some of its value. So you can, to respond to your question, can you build a new affectivity inside of capitalism? You can, but it's extremely difficult to do that. And the new emancipatory forces you will bring will also at some point interact with these structures. So that would be a short answer. This said, individually, again, individually, you can always do that. I think you can. You can do that. But individuals who are struggling against big structures will do just that. They will struggle. It will take an incredible amount of intelligence and inventiveness and imagination to do something different than what the big stream of norms pushes you to do.
So during your career, you have studied the morphology of romantic relationships. What connections do you find between social imperatives, new technologies, and socio-emotional educations?
Well, I mean, at a simple level, you could say that letter writing letters, love letters, which is quite essential to the Western tradition of love, depended on the technology of literacy. But in a more modern way, I would say, first of all, that the mass media, what Adorno and Horkheimer called the culture industries, entertained an extraordinarily close affinity with the theme of love and marriage. And we can say even that Hollywood what we call Hollywood, Hollywood would be practically unthinkable without the theme of love. For, I think, many reasons. One of them being that the heterosexual encounter enabled very much to present the body in a sexualized way, and to really exploit in a to its maximum the aesthetic character of the romantic formula. So we can say that these technologies, the visual technology, become quite quickly saturated with the image of love, and that it's intrinsic really to the making of modern media technologies. But that is on the level of representation. 20 years ago, I would say that technology would play a new role, which is to be a direct actor in the actual encounters. And I refer to, of course, I refer to internet dating sites and to the many platforms that exist today for people to interact romantic/sexual purposes. So technology has moved from being a kind of platform to represent love and to codify it, to give it a form, to guide also, to guide romantic behaviors, and to set cultural norms and ideals, among others, heterosexual cultural norms and ideals. It has moved from that to being an active participant, actually, in relationships. And in doing so, it also transforms them. So it's not only a mediating agent, as some people sometimes would like to think, it's also a transformative agent. I think we are probably in the middle of a revolution in the modes of encounters, which also has an impact on the ways in which people have relationships and end relationships.
So, sexual desire, male gaze, fashion, cosmetic complex, pornography, how pervasive is the eroticization of our bodies? And do you think that our bodies are becoming increasingly intangible like any other commodities?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Well, no, I mean, it seems to me that our bodies are becoming, or have become, increasingly material, in the sense that if in a religious culture you are tempted to view the body as a vessel for your soul, and if you tend to view your soul as the real locus of your identity and existence, I think that in consumer culture, the contrary has happened. The body has been the main receptacle of the incredible amount of consumer goods that are sold. And the body has undergone a massive process of aestheticization, which runs throughout all social groups and all social class. Aestheticization through the shaping of the body, the intense shaping of the body, cult of sport, health, and thinness, through fashion, the fashion industry, the cosmetics industry, and the cosmetic surgery industry, and so on and so forth. I mean, the range of industries who aim to control the body in order to make it an aesthetic unit has only increased in time. So I would say that it is, in that sense, it has acquired a visual materiality that it didn't have before. And so when Guy Debord writes The Society of Spectacle in the 1960s, speaking about the fact that images mediate more and more between interpersonal relationships and social relationships in general, I think this is particularly true of the sexual and sexualized body. I mean, Guy Debord does not write about this, but in fact, the sexual and sexualized body is, first of all, an image in Guy Debord's meaning. So it is very much tangible in that respect. On the other hand, one may really ask indeed, what is this body, in fact, which is more the property of the industries which, put cosmetics, makeup, and clothes on it than it is itself. So maybe in that sense, you meant to say that it was intangible. If that was the case, then yes, I would agree with you.
Can you tell us other words about your book from a sociological point of view? What is the meaning of the end of love?
So the end of love is a characterization of an era, first of all, and it's a title that wants to replicate or imitate the end of history kind of books. And what I mean by the end of an epoch, I don't mean, of course, that people individually don't fall in love. Of course they do. But I mean the end of an era where love was viewed as a transcendental force which guided our lives and which drew quite a lot of its meanings from the love of God. Actually, a great deal of the romantic tradition is influenced by religious metaphors. You love a person as if you worshipped her, and you worship her the way you would worship a god. It has to be total, absolute, it has to be unique, and so on and so forth. These metaphors of love and this historical analogy and affinity between religion and love, this is what I call the end of love. This is what has ended. So there are new forms of love which are emerging, but this one, which accompanied Western Europe for a few hundred years, has now disappeared. So that's one reason for the title of the book. The second reason has to do with examining concretely the ways in which stories end. And if you want, the challenge that I've set for myself in the book is to show that the reasons why, the big reasons why traditional romantic love no longer exists, but new forms of love exist. And the reasons why what we call love, loving another person, ends, these two are profoundly connected. So it's really about showing how the macro structural forces of modernity, as they have transformed the experience and the image of love, how these in turn impact on very specific, concrete relationships and bonds. For example, the sexualization, when we call what we talk about, what we refer to as being the sexualization of people, it does not relate only to our bodies and how we present ourselves. It also relates to the fact that the reality of relationship is quite often now located in its sexuality. And so the sexualization of emotions and emotional relationships has had an enormous impact on how we experience these relationships and also on the reasons why we end them. That's, for example, one of the topics of the book.
So thank you so much, Eva Illouz. Thank you for being with us and for so much insights and reflections that you gave us. Thank you.